I'm actually going to go to my gallery view so I can.
Nope, looks like we lost Deborah for a second, so let's hope she comes back on.
Nice to be able to.
Oh, Deborah, we lost you for a second, so just start again.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I may have an issue, so let me know. I'm not home. I'm a victim of the storm, so I had to escape Riverdale, and I'm at a friend's house. So I hope that we'll be able to do this all right. So yeah, I started saying it's really nice to be able to have poetry in our lives and not just coronavirus and hurricanes and all that stuff. So first I'd like to thank Rabbi Katie and CSIR for hosting this event. It gives us a chance to share and read poetry. And also I'm really excited to be here with Sarah Stern, who is one of my first mentors here in Riverdale. I moved to Riverdale about 9 years ago, and a few years after I gave birth to my youngest child, I saw she was doing a poetry workshop at the shul, and I was like, this is for me. And that's when I met her, and being in Sarah's workshop pushed me to get my first poetry chapbook published. So this is really, it really brings me home, to do this. I'm going to read a few poems from my new chapbook, which is called Escape of Light. Well, I've got all my notes here, as you can see. And I'm going to start with the first poem in the collection, which really informs what I'm trying to capture with the collection, which is, it's about how we give birth to ourselves. It's about birth and rebirth. It's about constantly reinventing ourselves as human beings, looking for something new, going to the next phase of life, the next stage of life. And a lot of what I write really has this in mind. So the first poem is called Emerging Art of. Check the box that best describes your career thus far, the form says, or how you see yourself as a writer. It seems I've been emerging for a number of years now, but how do I see myself? Tunneling down the dark, fleshy corridor of my mother's cervix, covered in ick, my slippery, soft skull bones mashed, intent on the drowning sounds and the wreath of light ahead, finally emerging to my first strident yawp. And from that moment, hence the steady march of metamorphosis, of emerging and becoming. What must the torpid caterpillar do to emerge from its glistening chrysalis a laurel-crowned monarch? The worm digests itself. The lowly pupa writes itself off in hopes of emerging a butterfly laureate. Self-immolation, it seems, is a requirement for emerging. So when you knock at the majestic doors, be prepared for bleeding knuckles and a tamped down spirit. Be prepared to extinguish yourself in a phoenix fire before you can emerge, established. That's the first poem. The next poem actually came to me, again, I was with Sarah. I don't even know if you know this, Sarah, but you were teaching Wizard of Earthsea for Bronx Council on the Arts. And we took, so the line from this poem is from, the title of this poem is from A Wizard of Earthsea by Ursula Le Guin, and it's called The Gestures of Trees. I imagine it must be godlike to create something from nothing, sound from silence, the stealthy escape of light from the tight black hole of space. The close-wrapped buds on the magnolia tree outside my newborn daughter's window wave and beckon shyly, resurrected from their snow shrouds, the frozen decay that birthed them. Come out to play, little girl. Like you, we were only a figment last season, and now we live. The next poem I'd like to read is, it's a concrete poem. I'm just gonna show it on my screen here. It's in the shape of bells, at least that's the idea. So the name of the poem is You, the Shining Thing. And I wrote this for a friend of mine and her partner who we both grew up together in a Hasidic family, Hasidic community. And she was married for a very long time and raised 4 wonderful children, and then left and fell in love with a woman. And this was very much taboo where we came from. Anyone who was considered other is taboo. Any relationship that is not, proscribed was really frowned upon. But she had the courage to marry this woman. She had the courage to proclaim her love. And so I wrote this like a wedding song for her, but also speaks to the difficulty, again, a metamorphosis, the struggle that some people need to go to be their authentic selves, like who they truly are. So this is called You, the Shining Thing. Meet me in the daffodils, that velvet field of sunlight. Wear your braided necklace of hope and hazy dread. Take this pipe and smoke a screen to shield us from their prying. We could be victory winged, all marble veined and dead, our gone heads with plaited locks, lazy, maimed, and dying. Dying could mean freedom. You could be a bell, you, the shining thing, and I, the weather wounding you, whispering and flying. I storm you sometimes, and I blow you sometimes, and I sing, and I wring you restless, till the breath of you is born, rendered airy as a machi's wing, secretive and torn. Even so, I love your swells, your shoulder dips, ma belle, your hollow waist, your flaring mouth, your beaded lip that's lying. Lying could mean liberty. I could be the bell, and you, the gnomy hunchback, bending low into my tarnished coat, sucking dry my brassy womb on cresting notes of sighing, rending me with loveliness, shy and slow as lightning. My blood-washed skirts, they float atop this bounded life I know. I call you and I bawl until the clamor of me cracks and writes a history of crying. Meet me where the golden vista meets our bellies, swollen. Bind your wrists, bind our breasts, grab your hair and shear it. Bells we are, these shining things, divinely tuned, appealing. Victory, her head foregone above the prow, is kneeling. She's woke, unblessed. Our time is chiming. Go ungently and know that you can bear it. So that's my wedding song for my friend. I just have a couple more. The next 2 poems, so as you've heard in the intro, I come from a family where being the grandchild of Holocaust survivors was practically a given. 4 grandparents, all Holocaust survivors, 3 of them with a tattoo on their arm from Auschwitz. And it was a part of our lives. They told us stories if they could. And this is how I grew up. So I wrote a poem called Revision, which is actually spelled where vision is in parentheses, because it's another example of reimagining, of a person reimagining their lives. My husband's uncle, who was in his late 80s, when he decided to remove the tattoo, the Auschwitz tattoo from his arm. And he decided in his late 80s that he was done being owned by the Nazis and he was ready to start his life. And the shock and awe of this action really drove me to write this poem, which then was made into a short film called Write Me, which has been very recently in the film festival circuit, winning some awards, so we're very proud of it. So I'm going to read you the 2 poems that were made into this film that speak to my heritage, our heritage as Jewish people. Revision. An old man I know, a great-grandfather, steps into the tattoo parlor, tells the artist, I am ready to begin my life. 8 lingering decades carried in his creased cheeks, 5 blue numerals etched in his crinkled skin. He presents his forearm for erasure. Make it disappear, the old man says. This number does not define me. And the next poem is called After Auschwitz, And this is the poem that is read in the film by the actress Lynn Cohen. This poem is a call to poets to write identity, to write the histories of those who have no voice anymore, who were murdered. And it speaks to all the groups, not only Jewish people, who were targeted by the Nazis. After Auschwitz, I am vague, I am hazy, I am indistinct. I am bodiless, but my black Romani blood river runs, boils and bubbles, and pushes up Pieter's daisies. I am faceless, but my non-Aryan features glow searing hot. My crippled mouth and communist eyes, coal to cinder, fuel to Himmler's furnaces. The fog of my Jewish bones blurs Vladislav's farmhouse. My homosexual tongue, a licking, lapping flame. A hideous gape, a burning, yawning mask. My embers smolder in the wake of the Zyklon B that fumigated my lungs and left me breathless, voiceless, mute, silent. So I am nameless, I am vague, I am hazy, I am indistinct. Write me, Paul Celan, your neighbor from Czernowitz. Write me, Nelly Sachs, your neighbor from Berlin. Write me, Miklos Radnoti, your neighbor from Budapest. Give me a body and fill me in and grant me life. Birth me, for oblivion awaits. Birth me, lest I disappear from the awareness of humanity into the amnesia of history, vapor and ash. Adorno was wrong. There must be poetry. Write me. It's a job of the poets and the writers and the artists and the filmmakers to carry, right? To carry the flame and to be the keepers of remembrance, I feel. I have two more. The next poem I'm going to read was written or published right after Election Day. The title is called Spectrum, November 8th, 2016. And Sarah has a poem also that speaks to Election Day, and I really felt very connected to that as well. And this poem calls upon the spectrum of humanity, all the colors that make up this beautiful world of humanity. And it speaks to how I feel, or how I felt as a Jewish person after Election Day. And you'll notice at the end, there's a hallelujah that I invoke that is a nod towards the death of Leonard Cohen, who had died the day before Election Day. Spectrum, November 8th, 2016. The day the red ones drew the curtains and chose the orange one to mind the white oval that had embraced the black one nearly 3,000 days. That day was the day the blue ones formed a veined parenthesis to contain the pulsing mass of the red ones, spilling sideways. Was the day the red ones and the blue ones never turned to purple, and the green ones stayed scattered, shoots pushing up to be counted. Was the day the brown ones huddled and burst, and waited for the white ones, the eye-hold pointed ones, to bear a burning broken cross, its twisted arms akimbo. Was the day the pink ones, like the blue one who missed her grip at the finish, snatched steel from between their legs and bound themselves each to each. Was the day the tan ones veiled themselves into invisibility. Was the day the yellow ones shifted and strove for the exits. Was the day the beige ones bent double and breathed Dios mío. Was the day the rainbows clung together, their colors melted and shriven. Was the day a keening hallelujah rose up from the teeming streets and evanesced into the violet sky. Was the day I waited for the raging ones to bring a yellow star for me. And that's it. I have one more that I want to add on because today is a special day for me. It's my wedding anniversary. And so in honor of my husband, I'm going to read a poem for him from my first book called Windows and a Looking Glass. And this is called Honeymoon Eyes. Everything is filtered through honeymoon eyes. The Piazza San Marco, its squabble of pigeons and tourists, a little bit of Italy, David Gilmour, pinkly lit through misty sheets of summer storm, sounds comfortably numb as he hums mightily to the crowd where we stand. Us and them is everyone. Black and blue we later found to be the colors of that evening, when our sweet Aurora was conceived in more than thought, more bacchanal than beloved, straight from a Veronese painting, the kind the Doge lived inside. Brilliant, luminous hues of viridian, cerulean, scarlet, blood, mine and yours awash with wine, giddy with cannabis and canals and cannoli, me in my dangerous blue dress, and you reveling with me at the Cafe Paradiso. Thank you.
Thank you so much to Deborah. Beautiful, such an interesting and eclectic range of things. Thank you so much, and happy anniversary. So with that, we're going to turn it over to Sarah.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Deborah. That was really beautiful. And thank you, Rabbi Greenberg and CSAIR. Great to be here. So many of Deborah and my themes, they overlap, and I'm really looking forward to discussing that after in our discussion. So my book, We Have Been Lucky in the Midst of Misfortune. We'll talk about how I got that name later. One thing about this book is that my parents, who are no longer alive, figure very large in the book. And so I'll start with this one called Horsewoman and Camels. Right after my mom died, I had a lot of dreams about her. That's probably very common. So this is about that. Horsewoman and Camels. She kept smiling at me, but looking about me too, as if I were the center of a framed collage. There were camels in a row, cupcakes, night lamps, a pigeon, perfume bottles, a bicycle, a drill, a four-post bed, one shoe, her bras hanging on the line, lots of shadow. I wanted to know what was making her so happy. I asked, and she shouted back at me from across the river. I couldn't hear a sound, but I saw her mouth. You. I woke up in the dark light, the wheels of things spinning, wet sparks, horsewoman and camel, sweet mommy, how she left me upright. And here's another one in that same thought in mind. It's called, this is for all of you who are listening and coming out for poetry. It's called My Little Life. My little life, the thought of it. All of us here and now have one. Our loves, what makes us happy, what turns us on, what grows in our garden. Mother would say, as long as there is something on the table to eat. Yes, that's true. But after we have that, we get to look around at who is sitting with us. Let us praise them and the light too. All of us, I think here, except for a few on Zoom, are living in the Bronx. And my poems, a lot of them do take place in the Bronx. And this one's about when they pave the streets and then they put the yellow lines on them. It's called The Yellow Lines. Freshly painted and symmetrical, rising slightly off the pavement. They make me think of what could be done while I'm still here. Winter gone, bougainvillea blooming in the Bronx, while I can remember it was you. Yellow dividing the road. Look, the white cat crosses for the first time. No cars, too early, just she and I and the lines that mark the block and beyond in this willow-wide summer. Smell the skunk, too. Far away now. What bravado to leave your scent like that. You've done it with me, through me, down my belly. Who said we run in parallel with someone we will never meet, but in a dreamscape? Yellow skunk demon, catbird, paint me too. I like to read that poem with people who live in the Bronx. um, so Deborah and I will talk about the name of this book, but and I have a section of the book that with the same title. I was able to visit the small town where my mother was raised in Rexinga, and like many of us, she our connections in terms of being raised by survivors. My mother escaped Germany in 1939, and when I got to see her town, my mother had already passed, and I'm very thankful to two people who devoted their life, Germans, who devoted their life to preserving the history of the Jews in these small towns. And they are named Barbara and Hans. So I was connected with them. That's another whole long story. And they took me through the village, and we stayed with them. And I saw what my mother had talked about my whole life. I always thought she was making these things up, but there they were. So this is for Barbara and Hans. Barbara and Hans drive us to the airport. In the car, we talk Mommy Schwäbisch. Guckemol, look here. Zwetschgekuchen, plum cake, Kartoffelsalat, potato salad. Du bist so dick. You are too fat. Mommy's so close I can feel her. We've arrived and Barbara follows the departure signs until we are by the curb. We open the trunk, pull the suitcases out. All of us overcome in this December Stuttgart morning to almost love somehow, to say that we were here now. Mommy, you never really left, but you did. You had many lives. I want you to come back so we can talk about them, now that I've seen the house and the Neckar swans. Tell me who else you love, who you really were. We roll our bags through the revolving door. Barbara and Hans drive back to Horde. So when my mom came to to America, she lived in Washington Heights, not too far from here, on Audubon Avenue. And this is called On Audubon Avenue. She said the pain ran up her nose behind her eyes until the blood thinners made their way. That moment you bring a straw to your mother's mouth, you're no longer the child. In the green room with the monitors, the beautiful patterns the heart makes. When she was young, the Irish bus driver waited for her on Audubon Avenue en route to her local 65 job. She'd run, red hair and freckles, letting go, turning into an American. I was trained as a journalist, and this is about that. It's called The Interview. Tell me about the time before you knew it all, when you were just starting out buying the things you needed. Peel away the layers of what you want me to think and just talk. Talk about the shoes, the light-colored sweater, the roses, the small roses you said spilled over the fence. Tell me about the first kiss, the way it felt. You knew from then on that kisses stop things like stop signs. Because if I remember, You said that's when you knew that life wasn't going to be a series of forwards, instead more backwards than forwards. At the end of your life, if you're lucky, you'll be right where you started, in the beginning, with the sun and water. Tell me about the coffee with your mother and father before school and the square of sugar. Speak slowly. I grew up with 6 older brothers. So this poem is called Three Daughters. Once there was an old man who had 3 daughters. One married heaven, the second married fortune, and the third time. On the right of his garden grew kindness, the left knowledge, and through the middle a row of evil sprouted. He built the fence around the plot, leaving a place for love to break through. It surprised him with fruit that he had never tasted before. Once there was an old man who wanted to be young, so he drank from the night and forgot his name. He went fishing and caught a carp with 2 green eyes and a violin between her fins. Once there was an old man who wouldn't take no for an answer. He asked the world to be quiet, and there was silence. He knocked on my door and asked for light. I gave him a cup, and he turned away. Switching gears a little bit, I have a section on being a mom and all the wonders, and this is called the soft spot. You know, newborns have that. We all had it. The soft spot. The soft spot grows smaller each day. It beats like memory through his hair. He gathers words for later. When he needs them, they will come falling out. The diamond-shaped opening was kind. It let his head mold and fit through me. We spend our lives trying to remember what we knew before the earth closed tightly. And I have 2 more poems. I think we're doing okay with the time. So my parents knew Jackson Pollock and Lee Krasner before they were very famous. This is about that. It's called My Father and Jackson Pollock. Before I was born, my parents were friends with Jackson and Lee when they were neighbors in the Springs. My father wrestled and joked with Jackson. He liked to come over and horse around with my brothers. Looking at his paintings in the museum, I thought, this is what I was then. Lavender mist, yellow islands, white light. Last summer, I went to the tip of Long Island to see his studio and our old house. They were both bolted shut, but the grounds were open. I saw the view of the marsh, the openness, felt the thin, long grass that sways with a whisper. My father watched Jackson paint. He once asked him what he was doing. Jackson said he was painting what he saw. My father remembers the call when Jackson died. One time he'd offered my father a painting. Take any of that crap, he told him. It's a true story. And this is the last poem in the book, and it's called Father Turns 80. My father said he once saw Eleanor Roosevelt wearing a big hat hurrying along 42nd Street. He also saw Winston Churchill getting out of a cab. He said his eyes were so blue, blue like he never had seen. He also talked about his Paris days, when he was a student at the Sorbonne after the war, and how they loved Americans, especially him. Father said these things one Sunday afternoon. I looked at him and wondered, what will my children believe were my moments, stretching out behind them? What will they hold up and say, that was my mother's time? Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Yes, I see all the clapping. Beautiful. Yasher koach to both of you. Thank you for sharing your beautiful and lovely work. And now we're going to let you two have a little bit of a conversation and we'll listen in. And if anyone on the call would like to start thinking about your own questions, feel free to start writing them in the chat and I'll start compiling them to read to Sarah and Deborah. So Sarah, turn over to you first.
Okay, yes. I'm going to just do it on gallery view so I can see. So Deborah, I love that our themes, we have some themes going, and in the poem that you read, Excess, you did read that.
Not
No, I felt like you like it's still into my head. And so that's why people should buy your book, because they can see that poem. But
Thank you, Sarah.
there's this wonderful, there are many wonderful lines in there, but one in particular, it's, what is yarn but a story unraveled? So I would love to hear how your poetry helps you tell the story.
Yeah, thank you for asking that. So in that poem, Excess, it weaves together, it's kind of a long poem, and it weaves together little snippets and ideas that are all about the world being too much with us, an eating disorder, you know, mothering children, relationships, things that come along in life. And each one, and there's the line where it's about your underwear, you know, your underwear just starts unraveling. And that's where that you know, the physical, we talked about symbol earlier in our class today, the physical representation of yarn, where you actually see the yarn unraveling, really made me think of how in poetry, you create a story from smaller stories. You know, you can take so many different ideas and little anecdotes and stories in and of themselves, stories that stand on their own, but then you can pull them together and create a new story, a new yarn out of the many smaller yarns. And I think that's really what we do when we write, you know.
Right, really. So there's like tactical, you know, I love that. And then this poem I know you read, Emerging Art of, the first one, I just love that, the compression that happens from your mother's womb to now, and in terms of poetry, it's almost like a ars poetica. And was that a poem that came about? Took you a long time to write that, or how was that process?
So that process, interestingly, was not that it wasn't one of the longer poems that it took me to write, but it came to me where the first line of the poem is, you know, check the box that describes your career. So I was filling out a form for a grant or one of the many submissions that we as poets always have to be sending in, and inevitably, as a writer, as a poet, you get the question, all right, well, describe yourself in terms of your career. Are you a beginning? Are you emerging? Are you established? Are you, you know, mid-career? And looking at those words and those choices that we were pre-given really made me think about, you know, because I had found myself literally checking off the emerging box for like a few years. And I was thinking to myself, when does that shift happen, when you can consider yourself out of the emerging stage and into the established stage? And it made me think, well, in poetry, you really have to struggle and work hard and put yourself out there and keep knocking on the doors of all these establishments, and literally, you know, so that's the literal construct. But, you know, when my mother read it, she was like, this is not about poetry, is it? This is about your life, isn't it? And I'm like, yeah, Ma, this is really what it is. It's about how we emerge in our lives, right? From one stage to another, like a butterfly. You really have to self-immolate. You have to completely, this is how I see it, completely destroy the stage that comes before in order to move on and become, you know, get out of that chrysalis, which is so rigid, and move on and become the butterfly. So yeah, that's where that came from.
Yeah, so it's wonderful the way it works on those on various levels. Is that your mom saw something totally different, and in that, as opposed to a form which I picked up on, right? But it is really terrific. Now, just switching gears a little bit to the film after Auschwitz, and based on those two poems that you read, I have a lot of questions, but I know we have limited time. But I was wondering whether after you saw the film, did it give new meaning to your poem? Did something like that transform for you?
So watching the film. So the first part was hearing Lynn Cohen actually recording the poem. Me and the director and the sound guy and Lynn, who has passed away in February, sadly. But hearing her read completely gave me a new point of view on my own words. You know, in the voice of not only someone else, but in the voice of this particular actor. And seeing it on screen, you know, film is visual storytelling, right? And what we do as writers is not up there, it's all in our heads. And whatever we put down on the paper is open to interpretation, right? For everyone. Every single person on the Zoom call can read the same poem and come away with something else, like my mother with the emerging poem, or poets with the emerging poem. Everyone will take what is relevant to them. And that's what I saw in the film. The filmmaker, Pearl Gluck, the director, she took the poems and she created a story that touches upon what I had in mind, but is also her own story that she wanted to tell. It combines the stories not only of the Holocaust survivor who removes a tattoo and reclaims his life, it's a woman in the film, but also victims of sex trafficking who remove their tattoos that they were branded on by their traffickers and reclaim their lives. So yes, it gave the poetry new meaning because it was viewed through another person's eyes, or, you know, a team, right, put this together, and they were able to make something completely new about it. But I do have to say that I've seen the film many times. It's only 7 minutes long, so it's like a visceral feeling. So yes.
Right. Wow. Very wonderful. People should see it if they haven't already.
I can share info about it a little later. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it'll be in a film festival at the end of August, so I can share the streaming info if anyone's interested in seeing it.
Okay. Wonderful. Wonderful. And two more questions. You wear so many different hats. I know you are a professional dancer and many other things. A mom, a teacher, a poet, all these different things. And I just wanted to hear how that informs your poetry, how one impacts the other, and how do you blend them? And is poetry specifically good for that?
Yeah, that's a good thought at the end. The short answer to that is I would love to be cloned. So, you know, that's the really short answer. But in the absence of that, every hat that I wear, yes, mom, yes, wife, dancer, writer, filmmaker now, every hat lends perspective, right? A different perspective on the same life. And so, yes, I think in my writing, and it's not only poetry, but I also write fiction, I think it is definitely a blend of how I see the world in so many different ways. I see it as the eyes, you know, through the eyes of a mom, a family member, a Jewish person, a woman, a dancer. You know, this is how I see the world, my particularly unique set of eyes. And so it definitely comes through in the poems. Yes, poetry, I think even more than fiction, because there are so many stories that can be compacted into one piece that it really does lend itself to variety of perspectives. Yeah.
Oh, nice, nice. So my final question is your next projects. What, I know sometimes people don't like to talk about it, but can you tell us what's cooking?
Yeah, sure. I'm happy to share what's cooking. I wrote a couple of pandemic poems, but they're sort of on the back burner. I'm in the middle of writing a novel of interconnected short stories, short fiction. Each story is about a woman, and each woman is somehow connected to the women in the other stories, or to one woman in another story. And they sort of, you get, again, it's about perspective. You get a perspective of each person's life, but you see how they're connected to other people. So that's what I'm working on now. And it's going to be.
Wow, wow.
Yeah.
I look forward to reading that.
Thank you.
Yes, yes.
Thank you. So I would love to turn the spotlight on you, Sarah.
Okay.
And thank you for asking such wonderful questions that really got me to think. You know, sometimes we're so wrapped up as writers in our own work, and you know, by getting questions from other people, it really turns us inward. And you know, so thank you for that opportunity.
Oh.
So you touched a little bit in your reading about the title of the book. We have been lucky in misfortune. I'm sorry, just can you tell us how you came up with the title?
Yes. Well, I was very lucky because it was a gift. So that title came directly from when I was in Germany with Barbara and Hans. They let me know that they had letters from my grandfather, who was a soldier in World War I fighting for the Germans. And so they had the actual letters that my grandfather wrote from the front lines back to the mayor of his small town, Rexinga. So they said to me, would you like to see those letters? And I was beyond, you know, excited about the fact that they even existed. Of course, they were in German, so I'm lucky to have two friends who translated it for me, and someone that they knew. And they appear in full in the book. And that title, We Have Been Lucky in the Midst of Misfortune, is what my grandfather wrote when he escaped being killed by the English bombs. So the title is becoming more and more relevant as we continue to go forward in our lives. Lucky enough. So I never met my grandfather. So he lives on in the title for me, and it was interesting because my prior books were much shorter titles, so I hesitated on whether to use a long title. That can be tricky. But then after a lot of thinking, there was no other title that fit this book, and the actual envelope that's on the cover of the book is actually the envelope that it appeared in. This was an envelope that he took to the front lines. Wow. So I was absolutely thrilled that I could use it, and it was still in existence. Leave it to the Germans for their records.
Touché. Wow, thank you for that. That's truly fascinating and just so unusual, you know. One of your poems that I don't believe you read tonight is called Protest at Union Square, November 12th, 2016. And in that poem, and you know, I read my own Election Day poem, but found so much in that poem to connect with. In that poem, you speak about Emma Lazarus, you speak about Leonard Cohen, you bring up politics, Judaism, family. It's all in there, and it made me, you know, it made me think about how do you view poets as recorders of history or as memory keepers? What is our role in recording history as we see it happening around us?
Oh, great question. Um, I feel that as poets and artists in general, we are the, you know, it's art that tells the stories of history, whether we like it or not. We are the recorders of history, and uh, you know, I think that I view poetry as a way to tell stories, and the form that suits me. I love to be able to braid things, images and thoughts, and a place and time. I don't know. That's the way my brain works, and I feel very lucky to be alive to write in that way, because not too far in the past, you know, you had to write a sonnet, right? That was the only form. And I think we're really lucky as poets that we have all these different forms that we can try and experiment and free form. With that particular poem, I wanted to have lunch. I think I wanted Emma Lazarus to come to shul with me.
Yeah, and come to shul with you. Yes.
Um, and you know, poetry allows the disconnect to make connections. And on that poem was inspired by that march right after you know, that election at Union Square. I felt it was kind of like a found poem. Those are rare, the found poems, because usually, like you say, you know, poets are knocking and knocking and working really hard and revisions. But that was a gift from Emma Lazarus.
Oh, I love that. That's great. And what's also great is your recognition of that, you know. I have a couple more questions. One of your poems, A Night Thought Can't Sleep, right?
Ah.
Yeah. So in that you recall mother's words and you have that written as keep writing, it's what you have. And as a poet in the poem, you ask for the words that grind us into meaning. I really like stopped at that line. You're searching for the words that grind us into meaning, and you were comparing it to the women that you were seeing dancing on the plaza. So my question for you is basically what is the inspiration of, you know, bringing your mom's words into this, and as a poet asking for the right words to say what you need to say?
Yeah, yeah. Thank you. Um, it's great to be able to talk about your poetry. You know, usually you read it and on to the next. So thank you for that. You know, that poem took place on Orchard Beach, and again, the braiding that poetry allows me to do. And you know, my mom was always so supportive of my writing. You know, she said, "Do what you love," and I really took that to heart, because you know, being a poet and doing what you love, as you know, is not easy. And so I didn't know things as you know, as poets, as artists, you see things, and all of a sudden things ricochet off each other, and the grinding into meaning just resonated with me at that moment. And it's really a thank you to my mom for you know, find those words that grind you into meaning, and you know, keep at it. So I think I mean, you talk about what your mother said when she saw that poem that you wrote, and I about you know, emerging writer. And this poem, to me, I'm coming to it with a certain idea, but I know people who read the poem have a completely other sensibility. Um, but in terms of what the gift that my mother gave me is that, you know, she said to do what you love. And that's an incredibly, that's a precious gift to me.
Agreed, agreed. Wow, thank you for that. I'm going to ask you one more question, Sarah, and then Rabbi Katie will, I think, open it up to everyone. My question for you is, when you write about your parents and children, right? You have a really keen eye for detail. You talk about the soft spot on the baby, and in winter garlic, you describe your father's body, the berries in making jam. Everything is full of color and life, and you can touch it and smell it, and you know, it's very, very, very detailed. But you're really focusing on the small things. So my question for you is, how do you use the small things or the ordinary business of life to inform a larger story?
Ah, yeah, I feel that, you know, what is that famous saying? Life is in the details, you know, and I find that the most uh, beautiful things are really in the details, in the very quotidian, you know, the, the things that we see every day that are incredibly beautiful, and in some ways I that's another reason I write poetry, because I'm fascinated by what seems so simple, and we see them, and then they're extraordinary. So I feel like you know, artists and poets do that. They celebrate the you know, what is very simple and occurring often, and I you know, I do that. I do that a lot, because I feel maybe that is the poet's one of the poet's roles, you know, to celebrate the ordinary, because I think so often it's exquisite, and so many times we miss it, and poetry is a way to celebrate it. So
Thank you.
thank you. Thank you. I enjoyed this conversation.
Great. Well, thank you both so much. And I'm sort of looking around to see, does anyone have a question? If you want to just raise your hand for a second so I can see. All right. Well, think about it for a second. In the meantime, I'm just going to give you a little bit of a preview of what's coming up before I thank our authors, and maybe someone else will think of a question. So as part 3 and 4 of our author series that's happening this summer, we have another poet coming up this weekend, Judy Baumel, who's another member of the congregation, and she's doing something very interesting. She is offering 10-minute personalized readings for everyone. So she has a form that she would love for you to fill out to choose a time over this Sunday or Monday. I'll put it in the chat. And she sort of gives you an option of what sort of subject you would like her to read on, and she will read you a personalized poem, and you get to have a little conversation with just her. So if you love poetry, which it seems you all do, please sign up. It seems like a really great and interesting opportunity. And then on this coming Thursday at 8 o'clock, we have Rabbi Ehud Sela, who's a former member of the congregation, who wrote a book called Seeing Angels in the Shadow of Death. So those are our 2 that are upcoming. I'm just going to scan the room one more time if anyone has a question. And if not, I'm going to say thank you so much to Sarah and Deborah. It was a real pleasure to have you on and hear your beautiful words, and so wonderful to be thinking intellectually in a different way than we often get to during these times. So thank you very much, and thank you all for joining us.
Thank you all. Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi Katie. Bye. Good night.
You're
Thank
welcome.
you.
Night.
Thank you so much.
Good night, everybody.
Sarah and Deborah.
Thank you so much, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.